Hi, I'm Joep van Beurden, and today we are joined by Kendrion Management. With us are CEO Joep van Beurden and CFO Jeroen Hemmen. Gentlemen, can you please describe the main characteristics of Kendrion as a specialist in electromagnetic systems and solutions?
Yes, Johan, I'll be happy to, and thank you for the opportunity. So Kendrion, as you already mentioned, we are a designer and manufacturer of electromagnetic actuators. Now that's quite a mouthful. What is an actuator? An electromagnetic actuator effectively is a device that translates an electrical input through, in our case, magnetic action into something mechanical, into mechanical movement. So think about a lock or something about holding something, opening something, closing something. There is an enormous amount of different actuators in everybody's life. To give you a very specific example of what you probably never thought about is that if you take a flight, then usually at the safety briefing, you're being told that if in case of the need for oxygen emerges, then an oxygen mask will appear. Now, the way that happens is that oxygen masks are actually stored overhead the seat, and there's a latch that's being held shut by a hook, and we make that hook. It's an actuator, because if you need the oxygen, a magnet draws open that hook, and the oxygen mask drops down. So a very simple example, I think that everybody can relate to, of one form of an actuator that we make. Now, as I said, there are many of these. We are active in two main segments: automotive, passenger cars, and commercial vehicles. And on the industrial side, in industrial brakes, but also in a whole range of other industrial segments, mostly in business-to-business applications. What we are looking for, because as I mentioned, there are so many of these actuators, is we're trying to grow and look for niches, for applications that offer good opportunity for growth. And what we have done over the past years, what we've identified, is that there are plenty of these areas, and they're all related to the broad energy transition away from oil and gas into more electrified applications. In automotive, I think that's very clear. If you think about everything that's happening on hybridization and electrification, there's an enormous need when you think about autonomous driving, when you think about electrified driving, for new and smarter actuators, where we see a huge growth opportunity. And this is where we are spending a lot of our investment dollars on and a lot of our time on, to make sure that we make full use of that disruption and that growth opportunity related to it. On the industrial side, I would like to mention the fact that we are a leading producer of industrial brakes. And these brakes are mostly integrated into an electromotor. And you know, you can imagine that electrification has a massive impact on the number of electromotors that you need, whether it's in intralogistics or whether it's in robotics or whether it's in wind power. There is multiple big applications where also we see huge opportunity, because the more electromotors you need, the brakes that are part of that system are being supplied by Kendrion. So that's another big area where we see huge opportunity. And then finally, to wrap this up, we see good growth opportunities in China. We've been doing really well there over the past 5 years. We used to be 5-6 years ago about 3% of group revenue. Now it's more like 10. And we see also there, both in automotive and on the industrial brake side, we see great chances.
Thank you for this clear description. Looking at more recent developments now, most markets are in recovery again this year. Can you please comment on the different dynamics for both the automotive and the industrial segment?
Yeah, certainly, Johan. So like you said, both markets, automotive and industrial, have in common that the end demand, that's the demand of the end customer, people buying cars, companies investing in equipment, robots, wind turbines, and what have you. So that end demand has recovered significantly in both markets. The difference in dynamic is both related to the volatility and also on the absolute level. So if you look to the volatility, then you see that the recovery in the industrial markets is much more stable. Also in industrial markets, we are confronted with raw material shortages, but somehow the industry is able to navigate around that. And also if you look at the absolute level, then the industrial business is basically already exceeding the pre-pandemic level of so the level that we realized in 2019. While you see that the automotive market is still significantly below the level of 2018 and 2019. And that is basically because of the semiconductor shortages, which is not helping industrial, but which is in the automotive industry an absolute bottleneck. So analysts expect that this year the car industry is producing 10 million less cars than potentially could be sold, purely due to the semiconductor shortages. So that is in a nutshell the difference in dynamics between the both end markets. So higher volatility in automotive, and automotive is also still somewhat below the level of 2019.
The next question is for Joep again. Kendrion recently acquired 3T in the Netherlands. Can you please explain the rationale behind this acquisition?
Yes, definitely. And let me start with a more general observation related to the trends that we talked, both Jeroen and I talked about earlier. So the electrification and the drive towards autonomous driving within automotive and the broad energy transition in the industrial segment. One of the so this presents us with a growth opportunity, but it also puts different demands on the type of actuators that we produce. There are typically, the actuator in itself is a mostly mechanical device, so an electrical input that translates into mechanical movement. But these actuators are becoming smarter and smarter. Example in automotive, the automotive world. The electrification also means that cars are becoming smarter and smarter. The semiconductor content is increasing enormously. Jeroen just talked about one of the short-term effects of that, which is that there currently is a bit of a shortage. But if you prepare to look a little bit longer, it basically means that a car becomes smarter, and the car therefore also needs to interact directly with the actuators that we produce. We, for instance, are developing a sensor cleaning actuator. It's a whole system, but effectively, if the sensor is dirty, it will need to be able to tell the car, hey, my view is blocked, so I can't look back or I can't look forward, which of course is a problem if the car needs to be autonomous. But then the car central computer will need to tell the actuator, please clean this sensor. So that means that the software and electronics content of the traditionally more mechanical devices is increasing enormously. Now, 3T is a software and electronics development house, around 70 FTEs in 2 locations in the Netherlands. So by acquiring 3T, we effectively enormously increase the access we have and the knowledge we have about relevant embedded software and electronics devices. So that's the strategic reason. If you look, that's the second one, at 3T's current business, their current software and development services business that they have is highly synergetic with a similar business that we have on the industrial side. So in short term, if you look at their current business of around 12 million euros, we have a similar business also of about 12 million euros. We put that together. So we get a nice software and electronics control development business that is potentially growing a lot, and that is accretive immediately. So this is the financial justification, if you like, for that acquisition. But the more important strategic consideration, as I said, is access to critical skills that will allow us to differentiate the actuators that we produce for automotive, potentially also for industrial brakes, as they become smarter and smarter.
That sounds like a perfect strategic fit to me. The other question is, several disruptive trends are supporting Kendrion's future growth. Can you name a few of these trends?
Yes, and it's actually, so maybe to drill down a little bit on the remarks I made earlier. So on the automotive side, the key trend, and I think everybody's aware of that, you can read about this in the newspaper literally on a daily basis, is electrification, autonomous driving, potentially connected cars and shared driving. Sometimes this is being an acronym that's being used for that, is the ACES, autonomous, connected, electrified, shared. That big trend asks for different type of actuators, smarter actuators, but also different actuators. It also means that if you look at the content, the potential content that we could sell into these types of hybrid or electrified cars is much larger than it used to be in traditional combustion engine vehicles. Now, let me give two examples of these new actuators. The first is, as I already mentioned, sensor cleaning system. We have struck a partnership with a large tier one to develop such a system, and these systems are critically important, because if you look at an autonomous level 3, 3.5, level 4 car, the amount of sensors that these cars need to be able to assist the driver steering the car through traffic is 10, 12, 14, 16, sometimes even more of these different sensors. And these are LiDARs, radars, cameras, what have you. It's extremely important that these devices are clean. And of course, when it's raining or when there is mud on these sensors, or you have a leaf in the spring, you will need to be able to clean that, or else the car will not be able to drive itself. So these are highly complex and fairly new systems. It used to clean your windshield, and that's all you need to do. And that's an example of an actuator where you need to control the flow. If you have 12 sensors towards the 12 individual sensors, the sensors will need to be able to explain to the car computer whether they're clean or not clean. The actuator will then need to steer the flow of the fluid to clean these sensors to the right sensor. That's example number one. The second example has to do with electrification. There is a law being enacted pretty much everywhere in the world, certainly in Europe and in the US, that makes it obligatory for electrical vehicles to emit a certain sound below a certain speed. So electrical vehicles are very quiet, too quiet, which is dangerous for pedestrians, for cyclists, for people in an urban environment. So they will have to emit a sound. We produce such a sound actuator, so it's a legal demand. You have to put that in. And these sound actuators are being deployed in basically all electrified cars by law. It's not just a sound actuator that we produce, we also produce the relevant software to control that sound actuator, and we even have developed a so-called software development kit that will allow the OEM or the user of that system to create exactly the sound that they feel belongs to the brand or to the car that they are producing. So it's a highly versatile modular system. It scales very well, that we currently have enough traction with, and that clearly is completely new, because in a combustion engine, an actuator like the sound actuator is not necessary, and therefore is not being produced. So this is a big trend. We expect this trend to be just starting. This is going to be with us for 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 years. A huge growth opportunity, and we're fully focused on it. The other one already mentioned as well is the more broad energy transition towards electrification. Their electromotors are proliferating in all these different applications. We see huge growth in the US, in Europe, in China. All these electromotors need brakes. We have a full range of industrial brakes, the two flavors, a bit more higher torque, lower intensity permanent magnet brake, the somewhat larger but lower cost spring applied brakes, we have a full range of this. And the electrification in our expectation is going to drive substantial organic growth over the coming 5 to 10 years also in that area.
My final question is, what are the typical revenue growth rates and potential margins within your addressable markets?
Yeah, based on our addressable markets, in 2020, we have disclosed our long-term targets of realizing at least 5% growth between 2019, so pre-pandemic, and 2025, and also increasing our EBITDA margin to 15%, to at least 15% also by 2025. So if you then look into our three business groups, and to start with IAC, where we are exposed, basically to many different end markets, ranging from medical, machine building, transportation, energy, infrastructure. In some of these niches, there is growth available, but in this business group, we actually prioritize above average returns and cash flow over above average growth. So here for the group in total, we expect to grow roughly with the global economy 1.5 to 2% per year. Then if you look at industrial brakes, here a significant portion, the majority of our product portfolio is targeted towards markets that are growing much faster than average. Industrial automation, robotics, wind power, AGVs, for example. So these are markets that in itself are growing with high single digits, sometimes double digits, but then coming from a lower base revenue growth per year. So with these markets and the product portfolio that we have, we expect there to be able to realize growth significantly in excess of the 5% growth for the group. Then thirdly, in automotive, also here we expect that we will be able to realize above average growth. This is not supported by the number of cars being produced. So the number of cars being produced, we will have some tailwind there coming out of the COVID crisis once the semiconductor shortages are solved. But on the long term, the growth should probably not come from increasing cars being produced. But within that, there are definitely markets with above average growth. You mentioned already sound systems, for example, based on new legislation. This started in 2019. The share of electric vehicles will keep increasing in the coming years. So this market in itself will grow substantially in excess of 10% is the expectation. Another one is active suspension. So currently a small minority of the cars do have active suspension. This is also expected to grow substantially over the coming years, driven by autonomous driving, but also driven by electrification. So also there, we expect that this market will increase by 10% at least. And the third one that you've also mentioned is sensor cleaning. That is basically non-existent now, but also with the expected growth in autonomous driving technology as from some years from now. Also, this market is expected to grow above average within automotive. So by shifting a larger part of our product portfolio to these three markets, and by winning more and more projects that are exposed to these three markets, also the average growth potential of our automotive business will increase, and that will then in itself support the growth rate, which we expect to be above 5%. So on the EBITDA, on the margin, these markets will support an EBITDA in excess of the 15% target, while at the same time will also allow us to keep investing in growth also beyond 2025.
Thank you for your clear answers. Thank you very much, Joep van Beurden and Jeroen Hemmen.
Pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome.